Snowflakes clung to Faisal's eyelashes as he banged on the frozen door, his fingers turning numb. His father had locked him out again, this time on Christmas Eve, whispering through the wooden door. "You'll learn respect when you suffer enough." Shivering in the pitch-black cold, Faisal felt his breath slowing, until headlights appeared through the storm. A black limousine rolled to a stop, the window slid down, and the woman he thought had been dead for 7 years whispered, "Faisal, get in. We have a lot to talk about." Faisal's teeth chattered as the icy wind cut through his thin jacket. Every time he moved, snowflakes melted on his eyelashes, stinging his eyes. Inside he could hear the muffled laughter of his stepbrother and the clinking of glasses, warm and safe, while he shivered on the porch. A simple argument about chores had blown up, and his father's voice had turned sharp, cruel, unforgiving. "You'll learn respect when you suffer enough," his father had said before slamming the door. Leaving Faisal out in the freezing darkness, he hugged his knees to his chest, trying to trap what little warmth he could, feeling the cold crawl into his bones. Each breath came out in white puffs, and he wondered if this night would be the last he ever felt. Every sound seemed distant, muffled by the snow, and every second stretched endlessly. He pressed his face against the porch railing, shivering so hard it hurt, wishing, just for a moment, that someone would see him, that someone would care. But no one came. The silence was heavy, pressing down on him harder than the snow, and for the first time, Faisal truly felt small, invisible, and utterly alone. His fingers, stiff and numb, twitched against the frozen wood, and his lips trembled as he whispered to himself, "Maybe this is it." The fear, the cold, the heartbreak, it all blended together until he felt like he could disappear into the night, swallowed by the storm, with no one to stop it. Faisal froze when the black limousine slid to a stop in front of him. The snow swirled around the tires, and for a moment, he thought he was dreaming. Then the door opened, and out stepped a woman with silver braids, tall, calm, and glowing as if the cold didn't touch her. Faisal's heart skipped a beat. It couldn't be her. Naledi, his grandmother. The same grandmother whose funeral he had been forced to attend, the one he had buried in his memory forever. His mouth went dry, his legs felt like lead, and his mind couldn't catch up. "Grandmother," he whispered, his voice trembling. She looked at him with eyes that held both love and a quiet fury. "Faisal, get in," she said softly, wrapping her heavy coat around him, and for the first time in years he felt warmth, not just from the coat, but from the touch of someone who actually cared. She held him steady, guiding him into the limousine as if he belonged there, as if he had always been meant to be safe. He couldn't speak, couldn't move fast enough. Naledi leaned close and whispered, "If I didn't stay hidden, you wouldn't be alive today." Her words hit him like ice and fire at the same time. Fear, relief, confusion, and awe tangled inside him. The driver started the engine, and she instructed firmly, "Leave now. No one follows us." The warmth of the car wrapped around Faisal, melting the cold that had sunk into his bones. He looked at her, still unsure if she was real, still trying to process that the grandmother he thought was gone forever had returned in the middle of the storm, appearing out of nowhere, like a guardian from another world. She didn't yell, didn't scold, didn't ask him to explain. She simply made sure he was safe, lifting him out of the night that had almost killed him, into a world he had never imagined could exist. Faisal's mind raced, his heart thudding so hard he thought it might burst. All the fear, all the pain, all the loneliness of the last year seemed to pour into that one moment as he realized that someone he loved had returned just for him. He sank into the seat, shivering still, but for a completely different reason now. Excitement, disbelief, and the first spark of hope he had felt in years. The limousine rolled away, carrying him toward something he had never dared to dream. Safety, warmth, and a grandmother who had come back from the dead just to save him. Faisal sat in the plush chair, still wrapped in Naledi's coat, staring around the suite in disbelief. The room glowed with soft lights, walls lined with rare paintings, shelves filled with books and treasures from all over the world. He felt like he had stepped into another universe, one he had never known existed. Naledi sat across from him, her silver braids shining in the light, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Then she began, her voice gentle but firm. "Faisal, I never died," she said, and he blinked, unsure he had heard her right. "I had to disappear," she continued, "to keep my life, to protect everything I built. Dangerous people wanted it all, And I had no choice. Faisal's stomach twisted. All these years he had mourned her, cried at her funeral, obeyed his father's lies, and endured endless cold nights, thinking she was gone forever. She reached out and took his hand. I stayed away because I had no way to protect you, until now. I learned what your father was doing to you. He turned my grandson into a servant, into someone he could control. Her voice cracked, and for the first time, Faisal saw the hurt behind her strength. I left you in his care, thinking he would love you, guide you, and he didn't. He made you suffer. Faisal's mind raced. Every story his father had told him about money, about why life was hard, every excuse for their poverty, it was all a lie. His father had stolen from them, lied to him, and used him as a tool for his own benefit. Anger and disbelief mixed with a strange relief that Naledi was alive. He had been trapped in a cage of lies and, now for the first time, the walls were breaking down. Naledi leaned closer. You were never meant to live like this, Faisal. You are my grandson, my heir. Everything I have, it was always yours, but your father wanted you to believe you had nothing. Faisal's hands shook as he tried to take it all in. His heart pounded, a mix of fear, hope and excitement. The man he had called father had been a stranger all along, a cruel actor in a play of lies. Naledi's eyes softened, but they held steel. Now you know the truth. Your life doesn't have to be his story anymore. You have a choice. You can rise, Faisal. You can be everything he tried to keep from you. For the first time, Faisal felt a spark he hadn't felt in years. A spark of freedom, of power, of a life that could finally be his own. The weight of lies began to lift, and with it a new world opened before him. One full of possibilities he had never imagined. As the limousine rolled away from the snowy street, Faisal pressed his face to the window, watching the familiar neighborhood disappear under a blanket of white. He had never imagined leaving that cold house would feel like escaping a prison, and yet here he was, unsure if it was real. When they arrived at Naledi's estate, his jaw dropped. The gates were massive, carved from dark wood with gold accents that gleamed even in the faint evening light. Snow crunched under their feet as they walked inside, and the warmth hit him immediately, soft and comforting, like stepping into another world. The staff greeted Naledi and him with bows and polite smiles. No one ignored him, no one whispered behind his back, no one treated him like he was nothing. For the first time, Faisal felt noticed in a way that wasn't frightening or painful. Rooms stretched endlessly, filled with paintings from every corner of the world, shelves stacked with inventions and artifacts, and soft carpets that made every step feel like walking on clouds. He wandered from room to room, his eyes wide, feeling like he had entered a dream he didn't deserve. Naledi watched him quietly, her expression soft but proud. Finally she spoke. Faisal, all of this is yours one day. You are my only heir. Everything I've built, everything I've protected, I want you to inherit it, but first, I need you to learn. He looked at her, confused and overwhelmed. Learn what? He asked. She smiled, a small, knowing smile. How to lead, how to protect, how to make the right choices. I'll teach you everything I know about business, about people, about life. For the first time in his life, Faisal felt a sense of purpose he had never known. It wasn't about doing chores or pleasing someone else. It wasn't about surviving or hiding. This was about becoming someone he could be proud of, someone he could trust himself to be. He imagined learning, growing, and one day stepping into a room and knowing he truly belonged there. Not as a visitor, not as a servant, but as someone who mattered. Naledi rested a hand on his shoulder. You belong here, Faisal. You've been through too much and now it's time to rise. For the first time, he felt the cold and fear of his old life fade. This place, these people, the warmth, the knowledge, and most of all, his grandmother who had returned against all odds. This was where he was meant to be. Faisal's heart swelled with a strange, powerful feeling. Home, safety, and the first spark of hope that he could truly become the person he was always meant to be. Faisal's father paced back and forth in the cold living room, his face pale and hands shaking. He had assumed Faisal had run away after the argument, just another rebellious moment he could ignore. But when the news flashed across the television screen, he stopped mid-step, staring at the screen as if it had burned his eyes. Reclusive billionaire Naledi returns. With grandson, the anchor announced, and the words hit him like a punch. Naledi alive. The woman he had buried in his lies, the woman he thought would never return, was back. And worse, she had brought Faisal with her. He sank into a chair, heart hammering, mind spinning. Fear wrapped around him like icy fingers. If she knew he was alive, she knew everything. Every cruel word, every lie, every punishment he had forced on Faisal. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, panic rising in a wave that made him feel small and powerless. Millions he had stolen, hidden, twisted for his own gain. All of it suddenly felt exposed. His secrets, his manipulation, the years of pretending to be a father while he robbed and controlled. They were all at risk. He remembered locking Faisal out, smiling at the thought of having power over him, thinking the boy would finally learn his place. But now that power had vanished. He tried to speak, to call, to explain, but no words came. The screen showed images of Naledi stepping out of her car, regal and calm, while Faisal followed behind her, alive, safe, and glowing with a confidence he had never had at home. Anger flared for a moment, but it was quickly replaced by dread. Every instinct screamed at him that this was the beginning of the end of everything he had stolen and lied about. He clenched his fists, feeling the weight of his guilt, his fear, and his desperation crashing together. The world he thought he controlled, built on lies and cruelty, was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The headlines repeated in his mind, each word a hammer striking at his pride. Naledi is back. Faisal is with her. The son he tried to break, the boy he tried to control, was no longer alone, no longer powerless, no longer in his hands. He sat frozen, the cold of the living room nothing compared to the icy grip of panic that wrapped around his chest. He had underestimated her, underestimated Faisal, and now the consequences were staring him in the face. The empire, the money, the lies, they were all in danger, and for the first time, he felt what it was like to truly lose control. The next afternoon, Faisal's father showed up at the estate, his expensive coat buttoned tightly, face pale and eyes wet with fake tears. He walked slowly toward the grand doors, shoulders slumped, voice trembling as he called out for Naledi. Faisal watched from the window, heart pounding, knowing exactly what was coming. The man stepped inside, falling to his knees, wringing his hands, begging for forgiveness. I made mistakes, mother. Please just let me explain. I love him. I raised him, he cried, his voice shaking, but there was nothing sincere in it. Naledi didn't flinch. Her eyes, sharp and steady, pierced through every act, every fake sob, every false word. Faisal felt a mix of anger and satisfaction as he watched the performance. The man tried to twist the story, to make it seem like Faisal was ungrateful, like he had failed as a father. He's lying, mother. I raised him alone, he shouted, desperation leaking from every pore. But Faisal had been ready for this moment. Slowly he pulled out his old phone and hit play. The recording filled the room, a clear, undeniable stream of his father's harsh words, insults, and threats from years past. Every yell, every cruel comment, every moment of fear Faisal had lived through was captured, undeniable and real. His father's face went pale as he realized the trap had been set long ago. Naledi listened quietly, letting the sound of truth echo through the high-ceilinged room. When it ended, she rose slowly, her silver braids swinging over her shoulders, and her voice cut through the tension like ice. This boy will never return to your roof again, she said, firm, cold, and final. The words hit harder than any punishment Faisal had ever endured. His father's knees buckled, shame and rage mixing into a look of helplessness. He tried to speak, but Naledi didn't allow it. She had seen through him from the start, and now the proof was undeniable. Faisal felt a rush of relief and empowerment, a weight lifting from his chest. He had survived, he had endured, and now the lies could no longer hold him back. His father stumbled backward, defeated, leaving the estate under Naledi's watchful gaze, knowing he could do nothing to undo what had been revealed. Faisal watched him go, silent but triumphant, feeling the first real sense of freedom he had ever known. The house that had once held fear and control over him no longer mattered. He was safe, protected, and finally, in the place where he truly belonged. Days turned into weeks, and Faisal's life transformed completely under Naledi's guidance. Each morning, he woke in a room filled with sunlight, the warmth of the estate wrapping around him like a protective blanket. Naledi taught him everything she knew. He learned about business strategy, how to make smart decisions, and how to lead people with respect and fairness. She introduced him to art, history, and culture from all over the world, showing him that knowledge and creativity were as important as wealth. At first, Faisal felt overwhelmed, doubting he could ever understand so much. But slowly, he noticed a change inside himself. He began speaking with confidence, making small decisions on his own, and helping the staff with projects that improved life around the estate. He noticed people listening to him, valuing his ideas, and treating him with respect, a feeling he had never experienced before. Naledi watched him closely, her eyes bright with pride. She saw something in him that reminded her of herself: vision, kindness, and strength. Unlike his father, Faisal genuinely cared about people, and his heart guided his actions. She encouraged him to take on small projects at first, letting him redesign a room, organize events for the staff, and plan improvements in the gardens. Every task he completed, no matter how small, built his confidence and showed him he was capable of far more than he had ever imagined. He discovered a natural talent for leadership, earning respect, not through fear but through trust and understanding. Naledi would smile quietly, remembering her own journey and realizing that Faisal had inherited more than wealth. He had inherited courage, empathy, and determination. One evening, as Faisal presented a plan to improve the estate's operations, Naledi placed her hand on his shoulder and said softly, "You are ready, Faisal. You have the mind to lead, the heart to care, and the strength to protect what matters. You are becoming everything I hoped for." Faisal felt a surge of pride and belonging he had never known. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. He was building, learning, and growing into the person he was always meant to be. The estate was no longer just a home. It was a place where he discovered his potential, his purpose, and his true self. With Naledi's guidance, he was not just her heir in name, but her successor in spirit, carrying forward the values she had lived by. Every day, Faisal felt a deeper connection to the woman who had returned for him, and to the life he was finally creating, one full of hope, respect, and the promise of a future he could shape with his own hands. The news spread quickly through the city. Naledi had officially announced that Faisal was her heir. When his father heard it, his face twisted with anger, disbelief, and panic all at once. He could not believe the boy he had tried to control, the boy he had humiliated and used, was now being given everything he had dreamed of for himself. Desperation twisted into greed, and he immediately began plotting a way to ruin Faisal. He called friends, lawyers, and even journalists, spreading lies and rumors, hoping to frame Faisal for theft, fraud, and dishonesty. He wanted the world to see Faisal as a failure, to shame him publicly, to take back control of the boy he had never truly raised. But Faisal had anticipated this. Calmly, he faced his father in the grand hall of the estate. The man's eyes blazed with fury, trying to intimidate him with shouts and false accusations. "You don't know what you're doing. You'll ruin everything," his father barked. Faisal stood tall, holding the evidence he had collected over months. "I know everything," he said softly, his voice steady. "The money you stole from Mother, the lies about our poverty, every trick you tried to use against me. I have proof." His father froze, panic flashing across his face. Before he could speak, Naledi stepped forward, her presence commanding and unstoppable. She opened a folder, revealing legal documents, bank statements, and records that clearly showed the millions he had taken for himself while blaming his family's struggles on bad luck and hard times. The truth was undeniable, documented, and absolute. Gasps echoed in the room as his father's face turned pale. He tried to speak, to twist it, to argue, but Naledi's voice cut through like steel. "You have lied, stolen, and betrayed for too long. This stops today. Your life as you knew it is over." The weight of his greed and cruelty crashed down around him. Friends who had once supported him quietly stepped back. Colleagues who had respected him turned away. His plans, lies, and schemes crumbled before his eyes. Faisal watched silently, feeling a mix of vindication and calm satisfaction. He didn't need to shout, fight, or humiliate his father. The truth had done it all. The man who had ruled Faisal's childhood with fear, who had stolen and deceived, was now powerless, exposed and defeated. For the first time, Faisal saw clearly. His father's life, built on lies and greed, was collapsing, while he, Faisal, stood strong, honest, and ready to inherit the legacy he had always deserved. The storm of lies and betrayal had ended, and a new chapter, full of truth, justice, and fairness, had begun. Faisal stood outside the old house, snow crunching softly under his shoes. The windows were the same, the door chipped, and the air smelled of cold, damp wood, the same air that had haunted him for years. Memories rushed in. Nights shivering on the porch, the cruel words, the endless feeling of being unwanted. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, knowing he had come here not to relive pain, but to find closure. As he stepped inside, the silence hit him differently now. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't small anymore. He walked through the familiar rooms, noticing the cracks in the walls, the faded wallpaper, and the coldness that had once wrapped around him like a chain. His stepbrother appeared silently, holding something in his hands. Without a word, he extended it to Faisal. A drawing Faisal had made years ago. A small picture of a house with a sun above it, bright and simple, full of hope. Faisal's eyes filled with tears. For a moment, he saw the boy he had once been. Scared, lonely, but dreaming of a place where he belonged. That little child, hurt and small, had survived everything. And now he was standing there as someone completely different. Faisal took the drawing and smiled faintly, a soft, quiet smile that held years of pain and healing. He didn't yell, didn't cry out in anger, didn't want revenge. The house had held power over him for too long, but now it was powerless. He placed the drawing carefully in his jacket, as if holding on to the past without letting it control him. Every step he took toward the door felt lighter, freer. The cold wind outside no longer bit at him the way it used to. He breathed it in, letting it wash away the last threads of fear and resentment. He looked back once, seeing the empty rooms, the shadows of memories, and felt nothing but calm. No hurt could touch him anymore. The old house, the years of neglect and cruelty, the broken promises, they were behind him. He walked away slowly, carrying the drawing and the lessons of survival, knowing he had the power to shape his own life, free from the chains of the past. For the first time, Faisal truly felt it, freedom. He didn't need the house to define him, his father's lies to control him, or his stepbrother's silence to hurt him. He was whole, strong, and finally at peace. The past could not touch him. He was free. Months later, Faisal stood on the balcony of Naladi's estate, the city lights sparkling below like a sea of stars. The cold wind was gentle, nothing like the biting winter nights he had once endured. He looked out at the world with a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from surviving everything meant to break you. His reflection in the glass beside him no longer frightened him. He had faced fear, loneliness, and lies, and he had grown stronger because of them. Naladi came to stand beside him, her presence steady and warm. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her silver braids brushing lightly against his arm, and whispered softly, "You survived a winter meant to break you. Now look how far you've risen." Faisal turned slightly, meeting her eyes, feeling a mix of gratitude, pride, and peace. He smiled, soft and calm, not the forced smile he had once used to hide his pain, but a real smile that came from knowing he had earned his place in the world. He didn't need revenge, he didn't need to make anyone else pay, because he had become everything they said he could never be. Every insult, every punishment, every lie had shaped him into someone who was not only strong and capable, but kind and wise. His story wasn't about money, titles, or possessions. It was about reclaiming a life that had been stolen from him, about proving to himself that he could rise above cruelty and fear. Faisal felt the weight of the past lift completely. The cold house, the angry father, the stepmother who had ignored him, the loneliness and nights of shivering. None of it could touch him anymore. He had survived, and in surviving he had built something far greater than wealth. A life of dignity, freedom, and self-respect. He took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill his lungs, and for the first in years he felt completely at peace. Beside him, Naladi smiled, proud and calm, seeing the young man she had always hoped he could become. Faisal looked out at the city again, imagining the possibilities, the future he could create, and realized that nothing could stop him now. He had reclaimed his life, his voice, and his power, and in doing so, he had finally found what he had always longed for: safety, belonging, and the quiet joy of knowing he was free. He turned back to Naladi, nodded, and whispered to himself, "I made it. I am enough." And in that moment, standing tall, grounded, and whole, Faisal knew that this life, built by his own courage and strength, was more valuable than anything anyone had ever tried to take from him.